Welcome to Sivako, Road to Avatar. My name is Shaun Alexander, and I'll be your guide to the world of Pandora and beyond. To support this show, head on over to www.patreon.com/avatarpod, where you can become a patron and gain access to exclusive content. Joining me today is a returning guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Sean. Good to be back. I'm Ross, and I was on for our discussion of the hype in 2009 versus the hype in 2022, and it's been really fun watching things play out. Through the release of the movie, it's certainly found a global audience, which is not surprising, but it's a little bit heartwarming to see.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of exciting to have you back because obviously comparing what we've experienced like in these last few weeks and thinking back all the way back to 2009, you've probably got like the best experience to be like, oh, look, I'm just seeing history repeat itself again.
Exactly. But one interesting wrinkle is that the first movie had this splash. Everyone was talking about the 3D, right? In my experience, I don't think people are really talking about it. I think this time people are more wowed by the CGI, which I think speaks to how successful the movie has been in creating what feels like a documentary of an alien world, right? So I think the first one had a little bit of PlayStation graphics creeping in here and there, and the 3D was the biggest leap forward. This time, and I'm curious what you feel like the global reaction has been in terms of the strengths of the movie, technically anyway. But yeah, I think this time I've heard people really praise the visuals being immaculate, and I totally agree.
Yeah, you know what? I think it is along the same line. And now that I think of it, barely anyone talks about actually the 3D element of the Way of Water, which is so interesting because I think it is like super strong in this film overall. We've obviously sort of seen like the evolution of 3D via Avatar now. I feel like we've seen it go from like some films will use 3D. Well, this before that it was the red and blue glasses, which were a whole other thing. I can't believe we actually watched films like that. How how do we enjoy them at that time? I honestly can't even imagine because I've still got like pairs of those glasses. I think for like a Toy Story game on the Wii U or something, and it
Nice.
looks dreadful.
No, I've never really tried them beside like a still image that you could look at, right? So I've never seen, I don't think I've ever seen motion picture with the red and blue. So I only have to speculate how unpleasant that would be.
But then, yeah, obviously we had Avatar in 2009, and that definitely started like that bigger boom in it. And I think I remember things like Alice in Wonderland the year after that again used 3D quite a lot, and I think that was quite well known for its 3D. But yeah, like now you consider what's happening with the Way of Water. I feel like no one's talking about the 3D elements that much, and I think maybe because people came to expect it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, if anything is associated with the Avatar theater going experience, it is the 3D. But I guess, directly relevant to our topic of the day, I am just over the moon regarding how good the 3D looks on the modern state of the art projectors. And to me, I mean, it's like 3D is born again, right? It's just absolutely incredible. And I think most people are not seeing it in one of these elite theaters, so maybe not everybody's talking about that same thing. But yeah, 3D really has continued to advance, and it's exciting to see, especially because if you think about the non-Avatar 3D output of the last few years, it has really tapered off. And I think that's kind of for the best. I think a lot of people were sick of the cash grab 3D, the post conversion stuff that looked bad. But we had lost a steady stream of, solid, earnest efforts in 3D. Things that come to mind are Tron Legacy, Pacific Rim, The Life of Pi. There's some really great 3D um, uh, movies that had come out, but I think we had a kind of lull for a while. So it's cool to see things come roaring back, especially with the advanced projection technology that is starting to pop up across the globe.
You know what? I saw someone mention that in the latest Ant-Man trailer, which just released, that they mentioned you can go see it in 3D, and that's the first time people had actually noticed it and putting that on the trailer again, which I think is a bit of an Avatar effect in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you just reminded me. I thought the first Doctor Strange looked great in 3D too. That was a really really fun one. But yeah, maybe maybe 3D's back. Let's hope that those conversions don't come back because it definitely generated a lot of resentment.
Yeah, yeah. I think the conversions has really what was causing the sort of like pain of and death of 3D at the time, because it just felt so lazy, because there was no extra effort put into it, no thought process during the filming. It was just, oh, we'll just slap on some 3D when we get to the end.
Yeah, good riddance.
Yeah. So, yeah, our main topic today is we're talking about the different formats of Avatar: The Way of Water and what's available for you to go see it in. So, obviously, there's a whole plethora. You know what? You can see it in like just regular 2D. Just go to your regular cinema. You know, you can basically pick that up anywhere. But when you want to go and see it for a more unique and probably the more like James Cameron experience, I guess, like the one that he wants you to have. There's like ones specific theaters you're gonna have to like seek out, and yeah, we've luckily I've actually me and you were looking through this and we've found a very useful website for this in case you're looking for particular formats to see it in. Let me just grab the link for that, which is lfexaminer.com/theaters. So from there, you can see all the different IMAX theaters available in your country and across the world, actually, as well. Now, the thing that I didn't know that you sort of alerted me to was that there's different types of IMAX projector, and that's sort of like an interesting topic. So I thought we should start with that. Now, you have seen it in IMAX, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I've seen The Way of Water twice so far. I've seen it in a full size IMAX screen. And if those have laser projectors, they tend to be a dual laser projector. And I also saw it in a smaller IMAX screen. And if those are laser projectors, I think those are exclusively single laser projectors. So um, I guess I'll talk through, if it's okay with you, I'll go through the different flavors of IMAX projector. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, this is like a lesson for me as well. So I think go ahead.
Sure, sure, sure. So the classic older IMAX projectors, if they're digital, so this is abandoning the film format. So Chris Nolan is weeping when he imagines this happening. But many theaters adopted digital projectors, and this is actually great for 3D. One shocking experience, and I might have mentioned this last time I was on, but I was so excited to see Avatar in one of these full size IMAX theaters in 2010 when I finally got the chance to go to one of the big ones. And it was using a film projector to show 3D, and it looked absolutely atrocious. So even since 2009, 2010, digital projectors really excel at presenting 3D. So the pre laser technology is called xenon. So if you ever hear xenon, that's equivalent to a non laser projector. Those look okay, but the picture is not sufficiently bright to overcome the dimming caused by the 3D glasses. So the Avatar 3D we got in 2009, 2010 was actually um, a sufficient downgrade compared to what's available now. And the big leap, I would say, is the advent of laser projectors. And these are not just IMAX. So there are a few IMAX laser projector sites available, and hopefully, if you're in a big city, you'll have one accessible to you. But Dolby Cinema locations also use laser projectors. And these come in two different flavors. I think the dual laser projectors tend to be older, and I don't quite understand why they used two instead of one. But my general sense is that the newest flavor of projector is a single laser projector where it's just one lens where everything's coming out and it can get the job done. So um, yeah, there are a few ramifications for these different formats, but if there's one take home you get from our conversation today, the listener, I would say it's make sure you see Avatar: The Way of Water in a theater that has a laser projector. That could be laser IMAX, that could be Dolby Cinema, um, but that is the biggest leap available to make sure that you have a really really bright, crisp image that doesn't look dim after the image is filtered by your 3D glasses. So I would say that's the biggest leap forward in the projection technology, and the next step is actually finding one of these theaters. And so, Shaun, you mentioned lfexaminer.com/theaters. It lists the qualities of IMAX screens and other, as we say, premium large format PLF screens. And so the thing you want to look for there is DL, which stands for digital laser, or DL2, digital laser 2 for dual laser. And so if you haven't seen IMAX in a laser theater yet, make sure it happens. It's just incredible. It's completely yeah, it's like 3D has really come of age. It's delightful.
Yeah, honestly. So this is where sort of our own experiences come into it. So for me, I did go see it in IMAX. However, I didn't see it in one of the laser IMAXs. I saw it in a one of standard. I, I guess what you would consider a bog standard IMAX, if such a thing exists. And yeah, so I've also seen it in the Dolby as well. So I've sort of got like both ends of the spectrum here in terms of what's considered like the highest quality and the lower quality.
Right. I do think James Cameron advocated for Dolby. I think that the premiere in London was in Dolby, if I'm not mistaken. So he's all in on Dolby, and that's going to be a great experience. Those theaters, I don't know if this is worldwide, but in the States at least, they have these reclining seats, which is really nice. And it's going to have all the bells and whistles. So they have high dynamic range, which means the brights are brighter and the darks are darker. This is great. Um, it's going to have 4K resolution. This is how the film was rendered and sent out. And it's also going to have full implementation of high frame rate, something we'll get to a little bit later. So as long as the Dolby screen has the sort of tall IMAX friendly format, which most of the Dolby Cinema screens do have that tall format, it's going to have everything essentially. And so I think that's why James Cameron endorsed it. So exactly like you said, Shaun, that one would be on the fancy end of the spectrum for a large format experience, whereas a plain old ancient xenon digital projector would be on the other end of the spectrum. But I will say, from my experience seeing the re-release of Avatar earlier, in the fall, one of my viewings there was in a Xenon theater, and it still looks really, really good. I mean, you're gonna have a great time. It's much better than a typical theater, but it's not all the way there, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I went into the that IMAX screening with the sort of idea that, oh, I feel like I'm going to like notice the high frame rate. But however, from what I now understand, high frame rate doesn't exist in, or like that's not noticeable within that because it's not in that version of those IMAXs. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that the case that you experienced was non-high frame rate, so always 24 FPS in your case, which is the standard frame rate for cinema. There are a few theaters worldwide where a Xenon IMAX does have a high frame rate, and the way that people have deduced whether it's present or not is they went back to the release of The Hobbit, which had HFR, and they looked at which IMAX screen was advertising HFR or not, because the theaters are not advertising HFR or not. You kind of walk in and figure out, whether it's happening or not. So people on the web have, been good sleuths and sort of back calculated which non-laser IMAX screens have HFR based on what happened with the Hobbit release. Okay, so I double checked that list, and your experience, I'm almost positive was non HFR based on the Hobbit data, so to speak.
I like that Hobbit data exists. I feel like that should definitely be the sort of like buzz word at the moment. Then,
Exactly.
so for yourself, you said you saw it in the both different types of IMAX, so the single and dual laser versions. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So, I bought the earliest ticket available for that Thursday preview showing on, I guess it was the 15th, right? The preview day. I was at the massive IMAX screen with the dual laser projector at 3 p.m. or whatever, earliest showing I could get. And I was so excited because when I had seen the re-release in that same theater, it looked spectacular. Um, but my experience was not the best when I saw the premiere. I actually left the movie feeling a little bit conflicted and underwhelmed, and something just didn't quite sit right with me. And certainly, one technical thing that I noticed during the first hour is that the frame rate switching was very distracting, and I think it kind of took me out of the movie. And this is another technical thing, and I'll go through it really quickly because this is really getting into the weeds. But it turns out that the dual laser systems used in IMAX are old and cannot handle doing both high frame rate and 4K. So it turns out the re-release was in 4K, but it was not in high frame rate, whereas The Way of Water is in high frame rate, but they dropped the resolution to 2K. So the projector can't handle both when it's doing 3D. And that application of HFR in that format, in this huge screen, it just didn't work for me. I don't know why, and I'll come to it later, but the single laser IMAX, HFR didn't bother me at all. I still don't understand the difference, and I guess this is the time to say it. I've tried to do some research on why it would be better or worse in one format versus the other. But my best guess, I don't have a conclusive answer, but I read some interesting research that says, human vision is really, really sensitive to motion, and that would capture frame rate in the periphery of one's vision. And because the dual laser IMAX is this massive screen, I suspect that maybe more of the image is in the periphery, and therefore it's hitting different, or the viewer would be more sensitive to the change between the 24 frames per second and the 48 frames per second. And if the smaller screen of single laser IMAX is less peripheral, maybe it's less noticeable. And my other hypothesis is that the dual laser projector simply has to be calibrated so that the two images are running at the same exact moment. And we think about the precision needed to sync up something that's running at 48 frames per second. There's a lot to calibrate there. So it could be the case that the single laser projector doesn't struggle with these really subtle calibration issues that could cause, a little bit of queasiness if the images were just ever so slightly out of sync with each other. So I don't have an answer, but I can say definitively my experience in single laser IMAX was much better because I wasn't getting distracted by the frame rate and the frame rate switching. And I guess, Shaun, I'll ask, generally, are you okay with high frame rate? And if you see one of the TVs that has the kind of motion smoothing on, do you notice this, or are you a person that it doesn't really bother?
So it's interesting because I'm quite interested in the high frame rate. I really like the films that Ang Lee's done using the high frame rate. So he did that with Gemini Man, and I'm really going to butcher the name of it, but he did it with another one, which is about a long halftime walk, but I can't
I
remember
wrote
his
it
name.
down. It's Billy Lynn's Long
That's it.
Halftime Walk. I knew I would have to say this when I knew I couldn't remember it.
I knew it was Billy, but I feel like I've used his wrong surname at some point previously. But I remember seeing those, and I remember the high frame rate in those, and I remember that being noticeable, but I didn't mind it. And I feel like Gemini Man was like a weird one, obviously, because there's all the weird old young Will Smith stuff going on. But I didn't find it that distracting. Now, if we go back towards The Hobbit, was distracting.
Yep.
But then I feel like that was the first ever like attempt at it properly, really. So to me, I feel like by this point now we're seeing The Way of Water with it. I feel like it doesn't bother me too much. I know what to expect going into it in terms of what it's going to look like, in terms of like the frame rate changing. It is obviously there's times where I'm watching and I'm like, I know this is happening. I know the frame rate's different, and I can tell. But it doesn't bother me that much, and maybe it's just because I'm not as big on video games, and I play a lot of video games, but I don't play ones with huge cutscenes, and I feel like that's what people feel like it's relating to the most. Is that right for you?
I have heard that reference. Yeah, exactly. The game is going at 60 frames per second, and then you go to a cutscene that's 30 frames per second, and everyone's saying, "What's going on?" And that sort of thing is what you're talking about.
Yeah, like it's so sort of noticeable. Oh look, no, I know we're in a cutscene now.
Right.
Is there like
Yeah,
particular
go ahead.
moments in the film that you notice it most?
Oh, there were certainly moments. I mean, the first hour, it was really, it was, if I could feel it leaping back and forth from moment to moment almost. And I think it was used in such a sort of sporadic way that is what really was distracting for me. And kind of like you said, I could be okay with a movie that's all 24 FPS. I am really surprised that Avatar works so well at 48 frames per second, because The Hobbit was a disaster for me. It really looked like you're watching documentary footage of these guys in cheap costumes and makeup, right, wandering around a set. It was so distracting. So kudos to Avatar for pulling off the high frame rate. The thing that was distracting for me, and I think I've seen people saying the same thing online, it's the switching back and forth. You shouldn't be noticing it. And I think that was an issue. I guess we might want to step back a little bit and just talk about, why this was implemented, and why it's why it's even in use in the movie. Do you have a sense of why it was there in the first place?
Well, from what I understand, the idea of it is that it's in these like intense, like, well, it's meant to be for these intense like action moments. In that it's to keep your focus more drawn to it, so that you don't lose out on any of the sort of image. The one scene I noticed it on, I felt like on my first view, and I noticed it on the most, was Jake and Natiri flying their banshees during the sort of like a nighttime sequence in the wave water. It's like during the like first half hour maybe. I felt like that bit I really noticed the frame rate. That was, and I feel like that might have been like the first time it's properly heavily used. And I feel
Yeah.
like their idea behind using it then was that, yeah, there's a lot of motion going on, there's a lot of movement, and you've got to follow this. And by smoothing it out, you kind of being able to, you're not losing anything from it.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. But the thing that I also noticed is, if there's a scene where they're just kind of sitting around, some of the very earliest scenes in the whole movie, they're just kind of sitting and the kids might be playing, and it'll quickly jump to high frame rate while a kid, swats the other one, right? And then
Mm.
it would switch back as they resume, moving slowly or something. So, yeah, exactly like you said, especially in 3D, without the high frame rate, you can get this sort of flip book effect or strobing. And so it is very helpful to remove that artifact. And, that can be distracting too. So, I think this movie has been a little bit of an experiment, and I think it's been largely successful. So I saw some polls actually run online, asking people, like, how did you like the HFR or the implementation of it in Avatar 2? And they also asked, like, where did you see the movie? And it was kind of interesting, because I would say no matter which theater people went to, most people were okay with the HFR. But sort of mirroring my experience, it turns out that single laser IMAX, for whatever reason, is the place where the fewest people are going to have a bad reaction. So it looks like between 10 or 20% of people will have a bad reaction to the HFR in single laser IMAX, where in dual laser IMAX or Dolby, it could be 25 or up to 40% people having a bad reaction. So it does seem to differ by format. And I guess one take home, in addition to me encouraging people to seek out a laser projector, is that if you're one of those people who hates HFR, if you hate motion smoothing, if you hate that silky smooth look, and you're sensitive to it, I would still encourage you to go to a laser projector, but I would specifically recommend single laser IMAX, based on my experience, and it seems like the experience of others. That's the format where it's least likely to leave a bad taste in one's mouth.
Yeah, so you've made a little like link for us, so I'll slap that in the notes as well. That links to some of these experience, and like, yeah, it's really interesting that people who are seeing it with that single laser, they're not having that issue quite nearly as much. Like I've got it up at the minute. I'm just looking, and so 89% said the high frame rate was okay, and 11% bad for the single laser. But when you compare it to the dual laser, it's 74% think it was okay, and then 26 think it was bad. While as other PLFs. So what do you think? What's covered in the other PLFs?
So that would be a non-laser IMAX, and there's so many formats around the globe, and this might be a good segue to talk about some of those other formats. But
Yeah,
I think there are these ultra screens, and there are the again the non-laser xenon IMAX screens that can show HFR, as we learned from the Hobbit data. um, those would be the ones captured there. That was surprising to me that so many people in this poll data, a lot of people thought the HFR was bad there, and I have no idea what's going on there because it really is a grab bag of different formats. But the one takeaway seems to be, yeah, that single laser is your friend if you're sensitive to frame rate, for the better, for the worse. I hate the look of HFR. It felt okay in single laser for me, and the switching felt okay too. So that was my experience.
Yeah, you know what? Let's cover some of those other different formats. So the first one that came to mind for me was 4DX. Now, I believe that's just using I think that's like a pretty much standard format screen itself, but it's all the bells and whistles that it throws in with it, which is the moving seat and the special effects it throws at you, like you're at like you're at a theatre performance. So, I think the classics, they throw some water at you. I think some smoke machines. Is there anything else they throw? I think maybe scents at times.
Yeah, people talked about how there was a distinctive scent, and maybe this is for the re-release. People are talking about the scent of the forest of Avatar, which they had to choose something. I'm very curious about what they chose. But no, I've never experienced the 4DX. I think that the olfactory part sounds fun, but some of the other special experience stuff, especially in a movie about water, I really don't want water to be sprayed on me for 3 hours.
So it's not. I think I might have told this story before on a previous episode, but my wife took her mother-in-law, or took her mother, to see Aquaman, and they didn't realize they'd gone to a 4DX showing. So, and as you can imagine, that's quite a wet film. So yeah, I remember them telling me the story that they ended up putting their raincoats on during the film because it was getting that bad. The amount of water that was getting thrown at them.
That's absolutely terrible. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the general sense that I get from the 40X stuff is, I don't know. I mean, I feel like these Avatar movies are a little bit of a roller coaster on their own. I don't need to be on a physical roller coaster at the same time. It seems a little bit like overload. Maybe for something like Top Gun, it would have been fun. That one I would be a little bit curious. But there honestly isn't a 40X screen close to me, so I didn't make the trek. I had a little curiosity for Top Gun because it's more of a G-force forward kind of cinematic experience.
Yeah. So previously, I have done 4DX. I did it for a re-release of the first Harry Potter film. It was like a special offer for a day where they were like, "Oh, you could go to see any film for £1." So I was like, "Oh, I'll go see that in a nice premium format." It's wild. It throws you around like crazy, honestly. But the other one I know that they do is D-Box, which is similar to 4DX, but it's minus all the other like smells and sensory bits. It's just the seat moving. And I've done that a couple times. I did that for Prometheus, and I also did it for Mad Max Fury Road. Now, Mad Max Fury Road, it was incredibly intense because obviously you're in a car most of the time. So your seat just vibrates for nearly 2 hours non-stop. And by the end of it, I was knackered. I was so tired.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, I might take the challenge for it. Fury Road is a great example. I'd put that very much in the Top Gun category. Maybe any of the Fast and Furious movies too, right?
Mm.
It's
Oh
a
yeah.
good fit. But yeah, I mean, Avatar is enough. I don't know. Maybe I'm too. Maybe I have too much, love for these movies, but they do have a lot of contemplative moments, right? They have emotional moments, they have humane moments, and I just feel like going back and forth between those story beats and the roller coaster thing. I don't know. It's not a match for me, probably.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like later in the film, there's moments of like people like drowning, which are quite intense, and I don't feel like I need to be like sprayed with water constantly during those like sort of very like emotional beats.
Exactly.
The other format I was thinking of, which I don't know if they do it in America as much, but I know there's one screen in the UK which is Screen X, and that is where it's a 270-degree screen. I don't know if have you got any of those over your way?
Yeah, we certainly do, and as much as we've been kind of wary about the 4DX, I've heard really, really negative things about the Screen X, unfortunately. And the big issue with that for Avatar in particular is that the main screen that you'll be watching is going to be a major downgrade too, right? Because I think Avatar is filmed for a tall format. I'm not sure that the ScreenX even has a proper screen in front of you. And the stuff that shows up in your periphery, I've heard it's extremely low resolution. And if you're, I can't remember if it's in 2D, but if it is in 3D, your periphery is kind of blocked by the glasses anyway. So it sounds like a really challenging thing to retrofit for a movie like Avatar. If it were made native for the entirety of the movie, and the director's intention was to present it as Screen X, I would be all in. But I think that it's typically a post production conversion, and that they just kind of smear some of the image, off to the sides. So I haven't experienced it. I would be kind of curious, but maybe not for 3D movie, because I don't understand how you can make the 3D work for the stuff to the left and to the right. You know.
Yeah, like to me, you know what? It really fascinates me, and I have to like find a way to talk to someone about it. How do they do that? Like in terms of like, obviously, there's a whole bunch of screen which didn't exist really for the rest of the movie, especially with something like Avatar, where everything is made with precision. There's not excess to show on, that was filmed in a way, because obviously it goes through so much post production. So yeah, where do they get this extra footage for? What do they know what to put there? And I wonder if it's someone who's is someone put on that team during post production who just works on what's around in those for that sort of format.
Yeah, so two thoughts come to mind. One is, have you ever seen when someone, films like cell phone camera footage tall, but they need to put it on the news and like something has to fill the rest of the screen? Like, I think part of it might be that where they just kind of like pull some image and,
Mm,
extrapolate or something like that. And again, this is the impression I get when people talk about how it feels to see one of these movies. They say that it's like really low resolution, just kind of made up stuff. So I, it gives me the sense that a lot of this is a cobbled together post production. But for a heavily CGI movie like Avatar, and it's not, the problem here is it's not totally CGI, right? But if it were all CGI, you could just render the rest of the image, right? And so I think it would work really, really well for an all CGI movie, right? Something where you can just point a virtual camera in a different direction and just output more image, right? It requires that you build the entire set and animate everything that would be there. But for a lot of these movies, I think there is stuff around that your virtual camera could look at, right? So I don't think it's insurmountable, but it's sort of like through the 3D post conversion, you want it to be done with creative intention, and I don't think that intentionality is there in all these cases that I'm aware of. So it's interesting. I'm curious, but yeah, it would be really nice to see it done deliberately.
mm. Is there any other formats that you know of? Obviously, there's things like it's just standard 2D showings and things like that. Have you seen it just in 2D?
No, I haven't. I talked about my IMAX viewings. I did pop into Dolby. I accidentally went to the re-release in a 2D Dolby showing, and I guess I will say for anyone out there that doesn't want to see 3D, some people get motion sick or have issues with the glasses and comfort and stuff. It is really cool that it seems that most Dolby Cinema locations are reserving at least one showtime a day for 2D, and the image looks incredible in 2D. Um, I have not gone to any of the non 3D showings deliberately, but I guess I will give one shout out to Real D. I had not seen Real D in like a decade plus, because as soon as 3D IMAX came along, I just always go to that. But Real D has come a long way. I think at some point they switched their glasses to this improved technology that lets you move your head around without distorting the image. And so even Real D is a big step up from what I recall when the first Avatar came out. So it's a pretty good time for 3D. And fortunately, the theaters don't have to do a lot of conversion to show something in Real D. It seems it's a very broadly available. So it's been really cool to see so many people at least being able to see the movie in 3D. Around the world, in fact.
Yeah, very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing like what those numbers look like in terms of how many tickets are sold that are 3D compared to 2D. Because I feel like I remember seeing a few like numbers jump up here and there to say, yeah, like especially for the re-release, I remember the 3D selling incredibly well for that.
Yeah, it was a funny thing also, and I think you're going to be doing a box office episode, which I greatly look forward to. But a funny thing I recall from the first movie is all these people saying, "Well, Avatar's cheating because the 3D tickets cost more," and so I'm sure we'll hear some pontificating along those lines for the sequel as well. Another really cool slash interesting thing is that the large format screens, are basically setting records for how many people are attending for the new Avatar movie. So I think it's, I don't know, on track to be the biggest IMAX movie ever, something like that. It's really kind of cool to see. Um, I don't know. I really love the immersion that these movies offer, and seeing it on a really really big screen is just you know that much more immersion. So I'm grateful to have a couple of these nice screens near me. And one thing that I also think about is how, when we're getting another Avatar in another 2 years, I probably will have another chance to see the first movie again. And it's something that just for me, it's not the same at home, right? So just being able to see that movie more times in like a laser IMAX theater, it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And at some point, I feel like we're going to end up with one of those, movie night things that the cinemas do, where you can watch a few in a row, ready for the new one on its like first night. So you'll be able to watch maybe Avatar: The Way of Water, and then the third one all back to back to back, ready in the theater in a premium format. That would be a ridiculous experience, honestly.
No kidding. I think with these runtimes, it's going to surpass, half the MCU with just like three or four movies.
Yeah, well, because I remember when I think it was the lead up to Endgame, I think, where they did the whole you could watch every Marvel film in the theater back to back. I think it was doing it one only like a few places. I don't even think it did it in the UK because no one's crazy enough to do that. Uh, but it seemed to be quite popular that people would go along and yeah, like spend. I think it was over a day and in the theater to watch all the films back to back.
Oh, absolutely. I remember people gaming out like when they would take a nap, just like dissing on Thor 2 or whatever. Saying like, I'm going to sleep during this one and, gotta be awake for this one. But I definitely didn't sign up for that, but I was a amused spectator. And I remember that very well. Those mega marathons are so funny to me. The closest thing I've done was um, friends and I got together and did all the Lord of the Rings extended versions all in a row, and I think that comes out around 12 hours, and so that's quite doable. So I can see myself taking a Saturday or something to watch three Avatar movies in a row happily one day.
So I've got a question for you, which is: do you think the the high frame rate things are going to stay through the whole series now? Do you think Cameron's like, this is what I want to do. I'm sticking with it regardless of what anyone says.
Yes, I would say overall, I don't think there has been backlash. I think there are tons of people that don't notice it. I think there's some people that think it's a little bit weird, but one thing about The Way of Water is that I think universally the first hour is the most jarring for people. But Cameron said that once they're in the water in the movie, that's always high frame rate. And as the movie goes on, you have more and more footage in the water. I think the movie sort of shifts into a, you know, constant state of 48 frames per second. Not entirely, but it's closer to that. And so I think it sort of is trying to ease people into it. And it would be interesting to see if the third movie is entirely HFR. Right now that people have had their exposure to it, clearly people are happy with the movie. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about it. I do think the most jarring thing is the switching back and forth. So I could easily imagine Cameron going all in for the third movie. I don't think it will bother me. I'm really happy with how it worked, and it's very very nice in removing the strobing, the flipbook effect when you have a lot of action and quick motion in 3D. So I guess I welcome this. I don't know what they're doing differently that makes it look better than The Hobbit, for example. I also saw some of Gemini Man in the theater. I think it made the action feel less exciting. I think it also had a little bit more of a documentary feel to it. So previous implementations didn't really land for me, but I think it works in this case. I think it really helps that you know that so many of these things are alien, so you can't get the feeling that you're just watching documentary footage. But I guess in this case, if I already made that comparison as a good thing earlier. So I guess in this case, feeling like documentary footage is a selling point, not a detriment, right? It's not breaking the fourth wall, because there's no fourth wall, right? We're staring into an alien world. There's not much of a set to worry about. So sorry if that got too abstract, but it's a really subjective thing, and I think it's going to work going forward.
You know what? I think that's such a great way to put it in terms of like, the abstract idea of, okay, what I'm watching in a higher frame rate. Suddenly, it feels like, yeah, I can see the sets of it all. I can see I feel like I'm there watching a documentary. But I think that works better for something that's totally alien. It sort of humanizes it more, so that it feels more relatable, feels more real. Maybe that's like the main aim of it in the end.
Right, exactly. So it'll be really interesting. I presume you've heard the rumors that at some point this franchise is coming back to Earth. How is that going to feel to be back on Earth? It could be completely harrowing to see, the devastated Earth in high frame rate. Feeling like it's a documentary of our own planet having been totally devastated. I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's, you know what, that was probably going to be something intense
Can't wait. Yeah.
stuff.
All right. I'm both dreading it and can't wait.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where I feel like I haven't really thought about much further into the franchise yet, and at some point I will. I'm very much enjoying the now at the moment for it, but I feel like at some point I'm going to be thinking forward and be like, oh, there's going to be some bad stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, is there anything else that you feel like you want to bring up for people that they should keep a lookout for, or yeah, just anything in general?
I guess I would just, reiterate that link, and I think you'll put it in text places where people can access it. But yeah, lfexaminer.com/theaters is a great listing where you could find theater info. And there's also a nice thread on Reddit that you can get to by typing tinyurl.com/avatar2formats. That's the numeral 2, avatar2formats at tinyurl.com. That has a bunch of information about this stuff that could be useful to people. It's a labyrinth trying to figure out which theater is which. Maybe some listeners saw the movie and have no idea what format they saw it in. They want to check, and potentially if there's an upgrade out there, I would encourage you to seek it out, because these are rare experiences. Maybe I'm getting too mushy, but I spent a lot of years missing the ability to see the first Avatar in theaters, and I'm already kind of thinking about how in a year from now, I'm going to be a little bit bummed that I can't see The Way of Water in, some primo format, but whatever, makes it a little bit more special. So I'll take the upside, I guess.
No. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I feel like it's been really enlightening. I feel like I know a lot more about which format I should be seeing it in. So I'm definitely going to try and seek out a single laser version of that format. Look, I've looked at the UK. It looks like there's only two, and they're in very random spots, if I'm honest.
No.
So I might be trying dual laser next. That will probably be my next setup. But I know there's a few of those in London, so I shouldn't have
Excellent.
any trouble going for that.
All right. Thanks so much, Sean.
No problem. Yeah, thank you all for listening. Hope you all have a lovely day. Go catch Avatar: The Way of Water in a different format than you've already seen. Why not? Go catch it in 4DX and tell me if you drown or not. Hope you have a lovely day. Catch you all later. Bye. Thank you for listening. This week's episode is dedicated to our patrons Eric Scrock and Patrick Regal. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/avatarpod.